Christ is risen. Christ is risen in me. Do you believe that this morning? This is Resurrection Sunday. You can believe, if you like, that there was a person named Jesus who died and who arose. But I believe that regardless of whether that's true or not, every morning I have the chance of resurrection. Every morning, Christ rises again within me. And I choose at that point what to do and how to move forward. Christ is risen in me. Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount was begun with the poem that Will sang, which is called the Beatitudes, which means blessed or happy. Mary May Osich paraphrased and interpreted the Beatitudes in a more unity way. And I want to share those with you this morning. Blessed are those who are poor in false pride, who are humble and unassuming, because they are willing to learn, they enjoy the kingdom of growth and expansion, they know the progress that leads to well-being. Blessed are those who use sorrow as a step toward spiritual strength, peace, and understanding. They find comfort in knowing God's presence. Blessed are those who are meek toward God, who know that power comes not through personal prowess, but through receptivity to divine power. Those who live by this attitude gain control of themselves and their world. Blessed are those who yearn for right thinking and truly desire to use God's laws rightly. Their reward will be an abundance of good. Blessed are those who are loving and merciful. Their mercy attracts kindness in return, for one receives in the measure that he gives. Blessed are those who find God's peace, who harmonize their thoughts with God's laws and radiate peace to others. They are children of the one and siblings to all. Blessed are those who live up to the highest understanding of truth, regardless of public opinion or mental inertia. Their increasing consciousness of the indwelling divinity will bring rich rewards. Hallelujah indeed. Their increasing consciousness of the indwelling divinity will bring rich rewards. This is a beautiful introduction to this Easter morning. The Beatitudes. How do we apply those to our life and how do we move on? And I think that mostly they're just characteristics of God. And not only are they characteristics of God, but they're characteristics of us. They're all the characteristics, just like the 12 powers that live in us, and we choose to use them and to call on them when we need them, want them, or desire to deal with them. Notice that part. We choose. Those characteristics are always there of us. But we choose when it is we use them and how we use them. And every time that I think about overcoming something that holds me back, then that is resurrection. Every time I accomplish something that I thought maybe was too difficult for me, that is a part of the resurrection. So think back. Think back to a couple of weeks ago when I talked about getting out of the boat. And once you get out of that boat, you have to walk on that water. And a lot of us have walked on a lot of water. When you think back to that, that's resurrection. That is you overcoming something that you weren't sure you could do and overcoming it to the degree that you were successful in it. And in resurrection, we let go of our old consciousness. We bring in that new consciousness and we let live in us our highest and best self. How many of you live in your highest and best self all the time, every day? Some people really do. I'm not one of them, so let me go ahead and put my hand down really fast. That's our goal. That is enlightenment. That is what Jesus the Christ became, enlightened. So as I look at those characteristics and I think about the Beatitudes and I think about the people that were surrounding Jesus in his last days, I tried to decide which disciple of his that I thought was the most powerful and the most meaningful and the most likely to step up during this difficult time. And the disciple I came up with is probably one that you're not quite as familiar with, and that was Mary Magdalene. So we hear about those male disciples, but we don't hear about the women who followed Jesus as well, who were also his disciples. And Mary Magdalene was one of those disciples. She was one of those who was there. In John 20, 1-3, it says, Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. So who was there first on the morning after the crucifixion? Mary Magdalene. She was the one disciple that had stuck through everything. I kill them at home, I might as well get rid of them here. I won't touch the ones down there. When you look at Mary Magdalene, you're looking at a courageous person. In John 20, we hear about her going to the first part of the early part of the morning, going to the tomb. But if you go back to John 19, you realize that she was with Jesus through the entire experience. She was there on that Sunday that we call Palm Sunday, when Jesus was a hero to the people and was going into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, and they threw their palms down and their cloaks down so that he didn't get mud on his feet. She was there for that part. Yay, that's the good part. She was also there for the part where they beat him, where they slapped him, flogged him, stabbed him, buried him, and did all of the things that they could to torture him for saying that he was the Son of God. Through every one of those things, Mary Magdalene was present with him. In the last hours of Jesus' life, the 12 disciples that we hear about the most and that we seem to know the most about disappeared. Some denied him, some forsake him. Some just decided they didn't want to be involved in this at all because of how it was going to, affect their reputation. So they all left. And Mary Magdalene stayed throughout the entire crucifixion with 3 other women, including Mary, the mother of Jesus. 4 women who were there. A friend of mine sent me a message that said I should let a woman speak this morning, since women were the only ones who bothered to hang out with Jesus in his last days. Nobody volunteered, so you got me. But she's not wrong. It was the women who were there. It was the women who were pushing and who were taking care of Jesus throughout all of the things that he was going through. Those 4 women were there, and Mary Magdalene chief among them. They were there to anoint his body with oil, and the disciples were locked up in a room for fear. They were afraid of what was going to happen to them, so they locked themselves in that room. If we go back to John 20, we see again Mary Magdalene, the first one at the tomb. She arrived and she saw that that stone had been moved. Well, she knew there was a stone there originally because she stayed until the stone was put in place. The men would not have known that had they not been told by the women. So the stone has been moved out of the way. It's been moved out of place. And she's frightened that somebody has taken Jesus. So she runs to Peter and she runs to John, the disciple that Jesus loved, and she tells them the stone's been moved and somebody has taken the body. So they run back, John and Peter, and they look for the body. They go inside the tomb. They find it empty, just as she had said, and they leave. I had to think a long time about that one. Why would you just leave? Wouldn't you be slightly curious where that body was? So I want to believe deep in my heart that they believed the stories that Jesus had told them that he would rise from the dead. But their actions prior to that really don't lead me to think that. It really kind of leads me to think that they're probably a lot like me. When you get to a place and it's not what you expected, the best thing I can do is return home. Go back to that place where I'm comfortable. Go back to that old consciousness that I'm used to. Go back to that place where I am feeling good about myself and I'm in those familiar confines instead of sticking around to learn and to grow and to love. So we each have our choice of how we're going to do and where we're going to go when we find that empty tomb. John 20 continues, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw the 2 angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, the other at the foot. And they asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him.' Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to your Father and to my Father, to your God and to my God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the risen Lord." And she told them all the things that Jesus had said to her. So we hear this story at least once a year, right? Same story. Every year we hear somebody talk a little bit about it. And as you know, I'm one of those who likes to question, so I'm one of those who generally looks at a Bible story and goes, so what? What's the point? What is the point for me? What is it that I can learn from the life of Mary Magdalene that matters to me this morning, that matters throughout my life? She'd been healed by Jesus, we know that. In fact, in Luke, it says that he cast out 7 demons from Mary. No arguing that point. He had healed her. So see, when I think of Mary Magdalene, the first thing I think about is healing. This is someone who's been healed. And then I can compare that to myself, somebody who's been healed physically, mentally, spiritually. However we've been healed by the love of Spirit around us. So then I think back to some more things. What are some other things where Mary is like us? She's faithful. She was at the crucifixion. She was there at the early morning, which is enlightenment, metaphysically. It means their highest state of consciousness. Jesus appeared to her during this time, and she knew that when he said her name, she was worthy. I say this morning, we are all worthy, period. Nothing you have done, nothing you have ever done takes you out of that worthiness to love and to know God. We are children of God. We can be at our highest state of consciousness. I believe it also speaks to Mary's value to Jesus and to his love for her and his support for her. For you see, Mary was living in the city of Magdala. It's a city on the west coast of the Sea of Galilee. It's known for its prosperity and the money that was there. And that's where she was. And she's called Mary Magdalene, not Mary the wife off, Mary the daughter off, Mary and then some brother's name. Each time she's spoken about Mary of Magdala. It's Mary Magdalene. She has her own name. She was a person of power. She was a prosperous woman. She was a woman who, during this time period, hung out with those who were considered well-to-do and those who were smart and those who were being very successful in their life. Who was Mary not? What do y'all know about Mary Magdalene? Anything? Through my entire childhood, all I heard about Mary Magdalene was that she was a prostitute. Most of us just didn't want to yell that out, I get it. But that's what we heard most of our life in church, that she was a prostitute. Well, if you go back to Gregory I, who was the Pope at the time, he is the one who said she was a prostitute. There is no evidence in Scripture that says that at all. In fact, he got Luke 6 and Luke 7 confused and gave a name to something that didn't exist. But I want to say this. If she was a prostitute, so what? Jesus is about forgiveness and about love and about accepting us as we are. So if she had been a prostitute, which she was not, does it really matter? She was there to support him. She was there to take care of Jesus and to help him. She's one of those who was giving money so that they had somewhere to stay while they were doing all the traveling. She was the one giving money so that they could be and do the work that they were doing. I also think, be careful, little tongue, what you say. 591 was a long time ago, and we still think she's a prostitute because somebody said it and we all locked onto it because that's a good story. That sounds better than saying she was just a supporter of Jesus. So as you think through, be careful what you say. Be careful what comes out with your tongue because our tongues are there to hurt and also to heal. Use your voice for healing. Speak out in favor of others as opposed to against them. Mary Magdalene, as I said, had been healed by Jesus and was then a supporter of his. She was there with him on Palm Sunday there, those 6 hours that he was on the cross. And she was the first to see him risen as the Lord. Metaphysically, we become each character in that story. And when we become those characters and we think about each of those characters, think about yourself as a disciple. What were you doing while Jesus was being crucified? What were you doing while Jesus was participating in the resurrection? Well, if you were a disciple, you were locked away in a room somewhere. Some of them. 4 of them, the women, were with him. But the rest were locked away. And we're afraid sometimes of our reputation and what people are going to think of us. So we lock ourselves away. Not literally all the time. But we do lock ourselves away for how we're going to react to people, how we're going to let people get into our being, our consciousness, how we're going to let them know us. And this says that we should not be locking ourselves away. We should be who we are and proud of who we are. Some days we're like the disciples. Some days I'm like Peter and John. They represent in the 12 powers faith and love. They know that Jesus is the risen Christ, but they forgot. Ever forget things that are important? All week long. I forget the things that really matter until I have time to sit down and be quiet and spend some time in meditation and in prayer and see and grasp those things that matter, those things that are important to me. I'm a little hesitant sometimes on what I believe and on my journey. And I think I've probably stopped myself from being where I could be at this time, but I believe that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at this time. Each of you is exactly where you're supposed to be as well. Some days we're just like Peter and John. Some days we're like Mary Magdalene, who represents strength and consciousness, the energy of God, the freedom from weakness, the stability of character, power to withstand temptation, having the capacity to accomplish great works, strength in the physical, mental, and spiritual realms. We spent the time of Lent, the 40 days before Easter, releasing error thought, getting rid of those things that no longer serve us, our old beliefs, our old teachings, people, if it's necessary to get rid of them to move forward, habits that we need to get rid of to move forward. We release all of those things. We let them go. And now resurrection takes place in each one of us. Christ is risen in me. Every attribute that Mary Magdalene has is in every one of us. The God characteristics described in the Beatitudes are a part of who we are. The resurrection is about the historical Jesus who became the enlightened Christ, but it's also about us and evolving our souls towards enlightenment. The idea of the risen Jesus the Christ communicates a message of divine support for the lives we're living. It reassures us that death and darkness are never the last words. For we are free in Christ. We are free indeed. No one gives me freedom. No one can take away my freedom. It's all up to me. I proclaim my freedom through the power of the Christ within. You have the opportunity to do the same. Youth poet Amanda Gorman reminds us there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. There is always light. Mary Magdalene was an apostle to the other apostles and a light in her time. We're called to be a light in our time. So as you celebrate the divine, the Christ within you today, be the light and allow your resurrection, your enlightenment to shine forth so that others can see it. Come into your power. Always find comfort in knowing that God's presence is with you, and let your light shine.